Hello, Toastmasters and honored guests. Welcome to my living room. I call this my living room because it has all my musical instruments. And we have a saying here that music is life. Today, I wanted to talk about the intersection between public speaking and music, and use a musical lens to find different ways to improve our speeches. Now, many of you know that I collected this instrument collection starting in 2024 through a freak accident when I discovered that a store liquidated everything. Therefore, I was able to accumulate a big part of the orchestra just by simply showing up at the right place at the right time. Before we begin, I would like to talk about the fundamentals of music and essentially what are some of the building blocks for those who may not have any idea. In music, we use two things to build passages. We use scales and we use intervals. And with scales, they are essentially the little stepping stones that go from one note to the same note that is twice as high. And then the intervals are common intervals that we use in music in order to skip some of the not so essential stuff in order to deliver a passage in a way that is appealing and can communicate the tone the best. Of course, I think it's appropriate to demonstrate. So I have a selection of musical instruments here that will help us do that. The first instrument I'm going to use is the euphonium. I played the euphonium a little bit growing up. I was more of a trumpet player, but I like the sweet tone of it. So for those who don't know, the euphonium is simply a tuba that is an octave higher. I'm going to first start with the concert B-flat scale and demonstrate essentially how the notes determine the mode. Now you'll notice a lot of those notes, it's hard to name them all in the short speech that I have today, but they communicate a happier mood. Sometimes they are used in sad songs to show longing for something that could be better. But the overall tone of that scale, called the B-flat major scale, was to, of course, communicate happiness, joy, etc. Alternatively, there's another scale that's commonly used in Western music called the minor scale. It is similar to the major scale, however, we modify 3 notes between the steps. And here's how it goes, the B-flat minor scale. Now you can hear that there's one note in the interval that does change. So the major interval is, and the minor, and those intervals are what essentially determines whether the music is happy or sad. Not everything is built on those two scales. There are in fact variations of the major and minor scale. And the most popular one in the United States of America is the blues scale. I'm going to demonstrate this on an alto clarinet that I purchased back in June. The alto clarinet is a deeper form of the clarinet. It has a lower tone. I think it's more growly. I think it's more appropriate for outdoor playing. Of course, the soprano clarinet has its place as well. So I'm going to demonstrate the blues scale, and you'll get the feel for it. And you can tell that that scale is definitely used in a lot of jazz and blues passages as well, just by simply going through the scale up and down and all around. Just like that. Of course, there are other aspects of musicianship that come into play as well. And some of these I would even argue are more important for public speaking as well. For example, breath support. Have you ever listened to somebody who talks like this and it feels like they're just trying to catch their breath? That they ran a mile and they hadn't run a mile in a year, and it feels like they're not supporting it. Or somebody who projects, who talks to the audience and not just tries to get the words to go past their mouth. We can argue in music that breath support is especially important for wind players and for singers alike. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to use my tenor saxophone. When we start playing an instrument, we are hardly ever good at it. There are a lot of things we have to learn. We have to learn how the keys work. We have to learn how to form what's called an embouchure, which is how our mouth is shaped relative to the instrument. And we also have to learn rhythm. So of course, there's a steep learning curve to music, just as there is sometimes for public speaking as well. Now as a musician, naturally I was able to transition to public speaking well, but I still had to work on some things. Likewise, when I learned the tenor saxophone, I was a trumpet player before, but I had to learn a whole different way of forming my mouth, learning how to use more than 3 keys. It was confusing for me at first. If you ask my wife, what did I sound like on my first day? She would probably say something a little bit like this. And you know that sounds awful, right? You're not going to go to a concert to hear somebody play that unless they're doing some sort of comedy, right? So behind closed doors, we have to practice, and we practice a lot. We work on our breath control, the keys that we press down, and of course, the way that we phrase things. And that was Mary Had a Whiny Lamb. And now I want to play for you, Mary Had a Jazzy Lamb. Not the most perfect. I did fumble a little bit right there, but it was certainly miles better than what I had before. Down the road, I'll polish it up, but for today's demonstration, I think you understand what I'm getting at. Beyond our words, there are other things that we communicate within public speaking as well, that we use. For example, hand gestures. But another one that is often overlooked is vocal variety. Basically, how do we talk? Have you ever gone to a used salesman and you just go to them and then they just start talking your ear off? They talk about how their kids are just doing so great and how they have this car and they really want to get off lot before 5 p.m. and they try to talk your ear off, and then suddenly you're just like, I don't understand what you're saying. They're trying to get everything out there, usually not with the best breath support either, as you can tell right there. And you're trying to understand what they're saying. But what if the car salesman came out and dialed back the tempo? They just said, "Hi, my name is Brian. How are you doing?" "That's great. I see you have your eyes here on this Prius. Tell me, what are you looking for in a vehicle?" Now, naturally, the pauses are not going to be that dramatic. I mean, that's more of what we do as public speakers. But you get the gist of how drawing back the tempo can help communicate a message far better in a way that's easier for people to receive. So I'm going to demonstrate that as well in music. So with a trumpet, I could play a trumpet pretty fast, and it is my first instrument after all, so. It's nice, but it's not really interesting. It's kind of like that's more of my warm-up phase when I want to play the trumpet for something. I don't typically play that musically unless there's something that could perhaps use it, but it's very rare and it's not often. On the other hand, I'm going to slow things down a little bit. So. I instead decided to go and default to the blues scale, much like I showed on the alto clarinet, because it is a scale I feel like I can communicate a message with. Now you heard that, and of course it was like a lot of legato, da 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 da. So when we're talking, We don't naturally want to connect everything like this and try to get everything to get out the door, even if our tempo is a little bit slow. We want to articulate. We want to articulate so that people can take in and process in the silence. So, a little bit more articulation there, but the volume was kind of like the same, right? So what if we softened it up a little bit and then gave some emphasis to the louder parts? Now it tells a different story. And of course, we can keep crafting the melodies in a similar way. And so when we use notes as a musician, we use them as tools to communicate a message. When we speak, we craft our words in the same manner. It's not just about what we say, it's how we say it. And naturally, the last thing that we talk about as public speakers is our body language. Our body language can really carry our message forward to the audience, because if we lean in, they lean in too. And when you go to a concert, you normally don't want to watch a musician that just stands around and play their instrument, even if they sound good, because it is a multi-sensory experience. And the same thing can be said about our verbal cues as well. Nonverbal cues, where we're essentially attempting to communicate a message with our hands, with our face, and with the way that we use our body as well. This is Antonio. This is my double bass. Antonio and I have been through a lot. Antonio I brought here from the Pacific Northwest. I was fortunate to acquire him. And essentially, he's been my buddy ever since he watched this orchestra balloon up big time. But of course, I try to give him a little bit of attention from time to time. But when you're playing an instrument, it's important that you communicate with your body as much as it is to communicate with your instrument. So there's a sheer difference between this which might sound nice. I mean, I feel like my phrasing is fine, but I'm just kind of standing there just trying to dig in and stuff. But what if I really put my body a little bit more into it? Let's find out. Totally different message suddenly. We're using a minor scale in that composition, but also what we're doing is we are moving to show that there is some sort of drama behind that. Thank you, Antonio. I haven't named all my instruments yet, but that one's a dear one to me, of course. And so naturally, when we're thinking about our speeches, what we want to do is we want to figure out what we want to say, how we want to deliver it, and most importantly, how's the audience going to respond to our message. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to demonstrate it a little bit more on the musical side with my last instrument, the clarinet. Earlier you saw the alto clarinet. The alto clarinet is of course a longer version. You can see that there's a clear difference. The soprano clarinet is more what you see in orchestras, Dixieland bands, as well as in old school jazz. So I started playing this instrument in 2014 when I was interested in learning Dixieland jazz. And so I've had a little bit more time with this than the rest. But naturally, of course, I wish I had more time with it. And it's not an instrument that I've been able to play all the time. So the first thing we want to think about is, how do we warm up? As speakers, we should be warming up. We shouldn't be just coming in cold thinking we're just going to deliver a message. We should be thinking about the things that actually make impact when we deliver a message. Singers and speakers alike usually do vocal warm-ups. So then we'll do something along the lines of ba 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 and ta 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 to get the vocal variety, the articulations, to get everything a little bit more warmed up. After all, telemarketers tend to smile when they're speaking to sound a little bit more pleasant, even if we still don't want to buy from them, right? But they still sound okay. In the same way, musicians also warm up their instruments. So they usually don't go in blind. I warmed up actually, in fact, a little bit before crafting this speech. And then, of course, I'll show you more or less what I do to warm up on the clarinet. So on the clarinet, for example, what I would do is I would first make sure that my reed is a little bit moist because it needs to be, otherwise it could risk breaking and it could squeak. So do that. And then I just blow some warm air in the column. I don't do anything super dramatic. Nice and easy, right? So it's warmed up for the most part, and of course, my warm-ups are not as involved as professional players. I'm just a musician who loves to play music for his own recordings, and really beyond that, I don't tend to play for more professional purposes. But the next thing we need to think about is how to craft a melody. And of course, what are the building blocks of crafting a melody? The scales, right? Earlier, we demonstrated on the euphonium the scales, the major and minor scales, as well as on the alto clarinet, we demonstrated the blues scale. And then, of course, these scales have been used to create this music all along. And so this is going to be no exception to that rule. When we craft a melody, what we want to think about is what is there, as well as what to take away. So in music, there are three things we can always look at. What can we add, what can we subtract, and what can we modify to make our musical passages. So I'm going to start with a concert C scale. I'm not going to use a lot of it, but I'm just going to use enough. So those are the notes that come out the most naturally for me, so I think I'm just going to use those. Now the next thing we need to think about is there anything in that scale that maybe I don't want to use? Well, I'm thinking that there are two notes that I may not use, in which are the second and the fourth. So here's the first, and that's the second, and the fourth is right there. So maybe if I remove those, it can give a little bit of flavor. Okay, we've crafted a melody. Now think about it. I want Dixieland. I don't necessarily want something that is nice and straight like that. I want something I can dance to if I had to dance and play at the same time. Which as a musician, we try to. Some of us are good at it. Others, it is what it is, right? Now, the question is, what happens if I go from a do straight feel to a do kind of feel, right? Okay, we're kind of getting somewhere. I did reintroduce one note back in when I did that, but I actually kind of like it. However, I'm not sure if I want to start on the root of the scale. Maybe I want to change the starting point. So let's try to take it up just one. Okay, it's almost there, but maybe I just want to modify one more note. Instead of starting here, what if I make it minor? You might think, oh, I'm going to darken the mood all of a sudden. But I'm going to switch from minor to major right in the middle like this. And suddenly, we're sounding a little bit more bluesy, which is great. And that's what the blues scale does. It actually combines elements of the major and minor scale together. Now, the next question is, where do I go from here? How do I transition? So I ended down here. But maybe I don't want to just go through the scale. Maybe I want to jump a little bit. So maybe jump up there. How do I do it? Well, do I want to use more of the scale? Maybe. Maybe I want to rush it up into there. Like that. So now let's go ahead and put some of this together. Maybe I'll improvise a little bit along the way. And it uses that same scale, but it builds the mood that I'm looking to communicate, which is a little bit more happy and reflective in some sense. And of course, you can insert your own emotions there because after all, it is up to interpretation. But I feel like we could add a little bit more because the dynamics were kind of the same there. So maybe there's something more I can add. Maybe I can go a little bit lower towards the end and end it on a quieter note. Let's try it. A little bit quieter towards the end, maybe more reflective, like I had a good day today, kind of reflective mood. But that's how we put things together, is we think about how we use our building blocks with our words as public speakers, how we sculpt these transitions to make sure that we get from point A to point B and make sure that the glue is there. And then finally, of course, how to land the plane to make it something that is worth the listener's while. And that's why I landed more on that bottom note, is because I wanted to land it in a way where I hype them up and now they reflect. Attention and release type of approach. So fellow Toastmasters, as I land the plane on my own symphony for today, I want to encourage you to look at things from the perspective of a musician. Musicians, of course, are a little bit different from the rest, but there are still things that we can take from them to make our speeches better. We can think about our words carefully, choose our subjects, choose our verbs, figure out ways to best communicate the message in the same way a musician would use the scales as building blocks to that. Secondly, of course, is our vocal variety, our dynamics and articulation that deliver our message. Do we want to deliver things in a way that are stagnant, that are always the same? Or do we want to vary it up so that when we are getting close to the end, we have people leaning in? And this is what musicians do all the time. Musicians build tension and they release. That's all it comes down to. And then finally, nonverbal cues. It's easy when you're standing up and delivering a message to use nonverbal cues, especially if you're more or less used to it. But for those who may not be comfortable with it, they should think of it as not an addition that will burden them, but rather as something that will enhance their message, so that when they push their message forward, they know it's being delivered to their audience. So fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, I just want to leave you with this. Every message is going to deliver differently to every audience. The question is, how will you compose your message to create the best resonance possible with every person you impact? Thank you.